Charles Cook joins us on the program now to discuss his piece. Charles, thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay. I'm just glad you're with us. So we were going over a bit of your piece, the media shooting bias. We've also been talking this hour with Noah Rothman of Mediaite, who also noted this, the ugly mindset, he says, that led the Denver Post to sanitize the political beliefs of the shooter at Arapahoe High School. And, you know, let's talk about what the Denver Post did here. You asked the question, why is it okay for the student here to characterize or label this individual as a quote, opinionated or outside the mainstream, or a fan of Keynesianism, or even, again, to quote someone to say, well, yeah, or to quote his own Facebook post in which he promoted gun control policies, but not okay to characterize him, to have a student characterize him and say, well, yeah, he was quite an opinionated socialist. What is it about that word, Charles, that set off the alarm bells for this editor, you think?
Well, I don't think her explanation made any sense. I mean, whatever it is that she thinks, she didn't explain it very well. I mean, they removed the word socialist, as you say.
Right.
And when she was called on it, she said that she didn't think that the student who had characterized him as a socialist knew what the word meant. Now, firstly, that's a very risky game to play. If they'd bothered to do their research, they would have seen that another outlet, CNN, had a similar quote, called him a communist, one of the children did, and said that he came to school with Soviet T-shirts on. So it wasn't as if this was a one-off. But even if it were, editing direct quotes like that is a dodgy game to play in the first place. But the reason, because he didn't understand what it meant, well, they allowed students to characterize him, in her words, as a Keynesian. Are we really suggesting that a high school student can't know what socialist means, but they can know what Keynesian means?
Right.
She said he was very opinionated. She said he had strong views on gun laws and stuff. Why is socialist somehow magically excluded? Why is that a more complicated concept? The answer, I suspect, is that it's not. It's just that she doesn't like that word being associated with what he did. And I would just finish my point by saying it is ridiculous to suggest that he did this because he is a socialist.
Right.
No one is saying that. No one does this on the right. No one says, look, he was a registered Democrat. Look, he believed in gun control. Look, he believed in higher marginal tax rates. Therefore, his shooting must in some way diminish those viewpoints. It's the left that does that with the conservative and Tea Party movement. So I have no idea why she did it, but it was bizarre from start to finish.
Well, as you say, when this type of a journalistic, I don't want to call it a game, but when this sort of, journalistic malpractice is committed, as you say, generally speaking, it does come from the left. You don't have a lot of people say, look, I did not see conservatives make a big deal out of Chris Dorner and his screed that, promoted all kinds of things, including gun control. We didn't make a big deal out of it. In fact, we very much said at the time that I don't think you can really look at this manifesto as, the words of a sane man. But as you say, the mainstream media is very one-sided in its application here. And so either I think what you and Noah and others who have been calling out the Denver Post and the mainstream media for this behavior, I kind of get what you'd like to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the mainstream media maybe not focus on these sort of irrelevant details and to try to play this game and to actually report on the facts that matter here. Or if they are going to... Oh, go ahead.
No, I would like to see them say nothing about it. And I have a reasonable bona fides here in that when the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I loathe, was accused of being responsible for the shooting at the Family Research Council, I wrote an entire piece called Words Don't Pull Triggers and said this was ridiculous and scurrilous and unfair. Likewise, when Piers Morgan was blamed by some conservatives after the Christopher Dorner shooting that you mentioned, I wrote a piece saying this is ridiculous. You cannot blame a broadcaster for the irresponsible behavior of someone who is insane. That is totally unfair.
Absolutely.
And yet what do we see every time, Cameron? we see people not just blaming it when it's a conservative, which I have to say is very rare. We see people presuming. I mean, what happened with the Aurora shooting? Brian Ross of ABC went out of his way to try and find a similar name on a Tea Party website. When Jared Luffner, who was not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination, in fact, he was a left-winger, it's irrelevant, but he was one, shot Gabby Gifford, all we heard was it must be this right-wing tone. The New York Times is still trying to blame right-wing tone for the Kennedy assassination. So, I mean, the gap between these two things is vast when there's really no justification for it whatsoever.
Absolutely. But do you see that? Do you think this is going to change at all? I mean, as you pointed out in your piece, I mean, they've been doing this for 50 years and going back 50 years, trying to rewrite who Lee Harvey Oswald was, what his connection. They're trying to rewrite, and again, trying to create a narrative that Dallas, Texas was a city of hate in 1963. So I mean, I'm very pessimistic about this changing.
No, well, it won't change, and I'll tell you why. I've written about this when I've written about the Tea Party. There is this odd presumption on the left, and in fact in the mainstream, that if somebody is vocal about taxes, that they're more likely to cheat on their taxes. You saw this with the IRS scandal. There is this weird view that if somebody is vocal about gun rights, that they're more likely to shoot somebody. I mean, it's irrational. You could make the same case, for example, and say that the marijuana legalizers in states where it's not legal should get a visit from the DEA because they're obviously more likely to be drug addicts. It's a very irrational and unreasonable way to behave in a free country. But they have this idea that because the Tea Party and the right talk about liberty and they love the American Revolution and they enjoy their gun rights and so on and so forth, that they are somehow on the cusp of starting a revolution and shooting up people they don't like. Of course, it's not true,
right?
But that's how they see it. And I think that until that link can be broken, which will be never, in the minds of the public, then it's not going to stop.
No, which is why, again, I think you do have to keep pushing back. Now, you know, again, it's always difficult. I mean, this came out, you know, the Denver Post editing really happened, late Friday night, the day of this incident at Arapahoe High School. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Because part of the problem is, you know, Charles, you don't want to, I mean, you got to pick your battles and you got to know when to, in the immortal words of Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to walk away and know when to run, perhaps, towards this sort of thing. In a breaking news situation, I don't want to start going after editors saying, hey, you're involved in media bias, but you can't let this stuff go either. So when is the appropriate time to bring this up? I asked Noah Rothman. He said basically right away when it happens, go after him.
I think we should have brought it up. I'm glad that we brought it. I'm glad Noah covered it. I'm glad that I covered it. I'm glad conservatives went at her on Twitter. The reality here is, and the nice thing about this is everyone knows this, whether they admit this or not. Everyone knows what I'm about to say is true, is that if that student had said he was an outspoken or passionate Tea Partier,
right,
that would not only have been left in the piece, but it would have been in the headline. It would have been in 90-point font on the Huffington Post front page. It would have been excerpted in every single tweet and Facebook tease that the Denver Post had run to promote their story. We all know that to be true. Immediately, Media Matters and the president and Obama for America, as it still really should be called, would have jumped on it. And the Tea Party would have been hit over the head with it. So, yes, of course, you have to do it right at the beginning. You have to say, look, you have just taken a word out which you would otherwise have promoted. Otherwise, you know, you look like you're banging on about something that happened a year ago, and you're collating it in a list, and you're relitigating the past, and that generally isn't a good look.
All right, listen, Charles, unfortunately, we got to run, sir. I appreciate you coming on the program. If we don't talk to you later on in the week, have a very Merry Christmas, and come see us again soon.
And to you, I'd love to. Have a great Christmas.
All right, thank you, sir. Charles Cook joining us from National Review.